Hello, and welcome to the Everyday Business Problems Podcast. I'm your host, Dave Crysler. Each episode, we talk to business leaders and subject matter experts to learn about the challenges they've overcome and the challenges they still face. You'll hear fresh insights, real talk, and get inspiration to grow your business. Hey everybody, so excited to be welcoming Roy Waterhouse to the podcast today. Roy has spent the last 34 years in the commercial printing industry working for Hopkins Printing. He's worked in pre-press, estimating, sales management, and corporate management. Roy, thanks so much for coming on the Everyday Business Problems podcast.
Great. I appreciate the invitation. Every time I see or hear a good podcast, I learn a lot. So hopefully that's something you and I can help other people with. So,
yeah, well, I think so. I'm excited to get into this conversation with you. I kind of came across you, in my LinkedIn feed, and your posts always resonate with me. A lot of lean manufacturing, lean thinking, topics that you're speaking on, and I always appreciate that. I've spent my lifetime in and around print, so kind of two connection points for us. So I just excited to have you on the podcast. So dive right in.
Good.
Yeah. So where'd you get your introduction to lean manufacturing, to the lean thinking principles that are out there?
So our history at Hopkins Printing, in 1993, we started down a continuous improvement plan. Started before lean was cool, before other topics were in vogue, but we had a consultant named Don Curtis, which if you have a big audience in the lean world, the AQL world, they may have known Don from their past. We hired Don off and on for about 15 years, and he would come in and work through flow charting, statistical process control, Pareto charting, all of those things. And eventually, as Don was a Deming advocate. So a lot of it was about the Deming mindset and the Deming philosophy. And then as more TQM or total quality management, Toyota production system, ultimately lean, he would start bringing all of those into the Hopkins system. So it began with him, and it's just been something in that time period that I've really embraced, because in my personal life, I use it aggressively. In my work life, I use it, and it just makes life more simple and more smooth, which ultimately makes it easier. So we've always had a consistent, continuous improvement program and policy in place. So
yeah, I love that. Would you say for yourself that it was kind of a natural progression, or were you one of the people that kind of, I don't want to say fought it, but maybe cautiously optimistic about, the results behind it?
Well, I could say it in a smart aleck answer or an honest answer. I never fought it, because I found I grew up more on the lazy side of the spectrum. And if I found a system in life that said I can do less and get better return, it just always appealed to me. Now, I've tried to overcome that penchant for laziness. I've tried to work hard and do things, but deep down inside, that was one of the things that attracted me to any type of thinking methodology that says, how can I get the most out of something with the least amount put into it? And from the Pareto, lean, the Paul Akers 2-second lean philosophy, I think all of those things really fit well together, because if we can be a 100-person company when we were 13 million in sales and be a 100-person company at 20 million in sales, there's something there about that lean methodology that says more work is flowing through the system with the same number of people, and nobody is working 50, 60 plus hours a week. So I've always been attracted to that type of thinking. I'm an extreme introvert on that Myers-Briggs introvert extrovert scale. So it's always been something that is just naturally fit with my personality. So no, I never fought it. I embraced it early on.
I love that. And, I think to your point, though, most people probably fall into the side of doing as much as required. I think that's the better way to maybe say that. And at the end of the day, if you embrace that thought process, bringing in lean or, one of any of the other methodologies that are out there can certainly be beneficial, not just for yourself individually and your contributions, but again, to your point, to kind of, the whole organization. How would you say, kind of on that point, how would you say that the work that you guys had done in some of those, early days, how did you kind of bring people along into that conversation? Because naturally there are people that are change resistors.
Yes.
How did you guys, tackle that at your organization?
Honestly, it was just consistently week after week, month after month, year after year. And early on, we had a few people that just said, I don't want anything to do with this, and they left. But we didn't have very many of them. Our CEO at the time and the founder of the company, Jim Hopkins, he embraced it, and he was well respected by everybody in the company. So when Jim said this is a good idea, people were more willing to give it a try. And it still gets resistance. You get into the whirlwind of hitting the daily schedule, making on-time deliveries, getting all of your other things done, and then this is added to it. I know we had a sales manager at the time that said, I don't want to get into quality control, statistical process control, all the predecessors to lean, because it's going to raise our cost and it's going to make my job harder. And I think a lot of people think that way, even though once you back up from it, you go, wait, if I strip 30% of the activity out of a process, I actually will have more free time. And I find the deeper I get into lean, the more downtime I have to just be able to think. And those weeks where you start on a Monday and you wake up on Friday and you've had no real time to just sit and think, those aren't the weeks that I bring the most value. If I have time every day just to sit and kind of ponder what's happening here, how is this progressing, I can just find myself getting a lot farther along on the plan. Yeah.
I mean, I think it makes a huge difference having, people at the top, support this stuff. It certainly makes it, easier for that middle management layer, as opposed to having to kind of fight both sides of the equation. If you're a change agent and you're stuck in that middle layer where, senior leadership or ownership, kind of however your org is set up, maybe isn't fully bought into, the benefits. Back to your example of that sales manager. I'm curious if you've read, it's Patrick Adams, but he wrote a book called The Continuous Appearance Trap around this thought process where, it's lip service for some companies, and it's real easy to get into, deploying tools and kind of look like you're doing this stuff. And I think that's where people feel as though this is way more work. And, now I've got to, dot all the I's and cross all the T's. So maybe you could speak to that a bit, from your own personal experience, what it's like to kind of, walk somebody like that through, how you're looking at different processes, how you're able to break those things down and take a look at what the, value add time is and what the real touch time is as compared to sometimes how long we tell people things it's going to take.
Well, I think early on, our consultant had a penchant for almost going the Six Sigma route, which did not fit our culture at all. We did not have a culture of engineers and analysts and statisticians. So we've always migrated more towards the lean, where you have a principle that's PDCA.
Yep.
And we'll have a key managers meeting every Tuesday. And one of the things we do in each key managers meeting is we go around the table and we answer 3 questions. How's it going? What's my lean improvement for the week? And how did I invest in somebody's emotional bank account?
Oh, I like that.
Often in that lean, it will be one of the key managers talking about PDCA, because it's just an intuitive, smart way of doing things. And I think what's happened with us over the years is we probably only use 7 to 10 real tools, but they're the simple tools. You do a flow chart, you do PDCA, you learn the 7 ways, you learn 5S, and that's simple things to work on. And then we have embraced the Paul Akers 2-second lean model, where, even in one of our weekly huddles with the sales team, salespeople have to bring 1 lean improvement for the week, and we call it our 2-second lean improvement. And it can be from home, it can be from work. And what we found is making it more simple is it's easier for people to embrace, because if it becomes major work, it's harder to get done. And, if we've done many multi-day, week-long Kaizen events, those have been much harder to get benefit out of, because it's harder to get people out of their department and focused and not always wanting to go check on things. So we found making it more simple. I mean, we do custom manufacturing, so we do roughly 600 projects a month, and they're all different. So we do there's a lot of just chasing things. Customer calls and you change a color on a project, or change a size, or change where it delivers to, or change how something backs up. So there is a lot of whirlwind with our managers. That if a typical job turns in 5 days and a proof gets held an extra day, but the customer still needs it for a meeting, it's just this constant flow. And if I were to try to pull a manager out for 2 hours a week and say, let's totally change our thinking over here, it would be a hard ask, because their mind is always going back to, well, we have customers, and if things are not set up right when second or third shift comes in and we lose 2 hours, I could be in trouble tomorrow. So for us, it's been more about finding the things that are simpler. We're big believers in visual management. So we have our largest customer has a certain way that they want boxes stacked on a skid, and a certain type of skid, a certain size, a certain way that the fork enters it from the forklift. So we built signage in every place that we box things and skid things, and we just made that our corporate standard. So now, if I walk out into an area where they're boxing or finishing something, I know exactly how it goes, because there's a sign hanging from the ceiling, and it's simple. Here's where the label goes. Here's what the label says. It goes in the upper left on the end of the box. So it's made it simple just by saying this is how we're going to treat everybody, because it's our best standard. And I think that has been helpful, because it's been quicker to train, easier to train. So you bring in somebody new, and they're not battling it, because everybody's just doing it that way. So
or having to go, hunt somebody down to ask him a question. I mean, I love that example. And, I think what I'll hear from time to time from folks is, that should be obvious, or we've already trained people on that. So I'd love to hear, kind of from from your team's perspective, I mean, what are the kind of feedback and the things as you guys have implemented some of that, visual management, as you guys have done some of the other, whether it's 5S or some of the other kind of specific lean tools, what's the feedback, kind of general consensus been from the folks doing the actual work?
I would say the general feedback is very positive. If I have somebody who's a primary operator on a printing press that's 40 feet long, that has a helper that is running 15 to 18,000 sheets an hour, and the customer cares about every sheet, if I can simplify his life and he can spend more time just looking at the product instead of searching for a tool or find where's the ink for this job, where's the paper for this job, it allows me to have a lead press operator standing at the end of the press, and he likes his job better because when a press operator, a skilled operator has a bad product, they beat themselves up because they see themselves at a higher level. So if I can take away the distractions through lean, I then give that person the ability to calm down and relax a little and just look at what's happening. And I find, operators very happy about that. We did a spaghetti diagram on a setup of a critical fold, and then we videotaped it, and then we got 3 or 4 people in a room. And once you do that, the operator realizes how crazy it is. They're walking down and back and around and walk over here and get this. And then there was an attachment to the folder that didn't line up right, and it was hard to move. So they had to get a hand truck. So we took that attachment, we put it on casters at the right height. Now the folder operator just rolls it up and snaps it in place. And all of the tools are on the one side. We moved some adjustments to the other side. So now they see what they're doing as opposed to just running around. They just are in one place and it's calm. And if they need a tool, they open a door to where the adjustment is and the tool's hanging there. And if the tool's not there, you call over the supervisor and say, we've got a problem, because they don't want to go looking for something. And it's the whole process of getting the material where it goes into the piece of equipment and making it simple. From our printing press room to our cutting and folding and bindery room, things used to just come over and be put somewhere. So then we drew lanes on the floor that said, this goes to this machine. So now that operator, they'll look at the next job on the schedule, and in theory, and 9 times out of 10, it's the next job in the aisle. Yeah. They don't have to move something to get to something or go find it. They just turn around and grab it and pull it forward and work on it. So what we find, if anything we can do to make the world more peaceful and calm, people get great benefit from. And it's all the way from how we invoice to how we answer the phones to how a salesperson submits a project. We have a system called Purple X internally. Our chief operating officer, Vicki, years ago went back into a shipping clerk, and she said, I never get a ticket that's right. And you knew it wasn't true, but in her heart it was, because it impacted her. So Vicki happened to have a red Sharpie in her hand, and she gave it to Cam, and she said, Cam, every time there's a mistake on a ticket, put a purple X on it. And then when those tickets would go up to billing, somebody started doing a Pareto chart on it. We found there were 2 key issues. We addressed those issues, and it made Cam and shipping's life easier. So then our Vicki ended up saying, well, let's run this through the whole company. So then we built it into our intranet, a Purple X system, that if somebody gets a project and they have to stop what they're doing and make a call or ask a question, they have to, well, they don't have to, they should do a purple X. And then that becomes training upstream. Because usually if one person's making the mistake, multiple people are. So it's a lot of that type of thinking with how can we make somebody, when they see a job for the first time, understand it without any tension. So that's something we spend a lot of energy on.
I mean, so many amazing things to unpack in what you just said, Roy. I mean, I love this stuff, and I'm so glad that you're on the podcast and sharing this stuff. I mean, it's just so valuable for people, because I think a lot of times, a couple thoughts come to mind, right? A lot of times I'm hearing from companies, we don't have time for that. We've tried this before. It wasn't successful. We don't have the right, technology in place to support this. And so, I'd love to hear just from your own experience, kind of some of the answers around that, because, this stuff is a process. It doesn't happen overnight. Yeah. But how are you guys able to take so many of these steps and then carry it through? Like, I love the fact that it is front door to back door for you guys. You can really tell the difference about a company when, if they're living that continuous, appearance trap, or if they're really doing this stuff. Yeah. So maybe you could talk a little bit about that for the folks out there that kind of, don't have the time, don't have the energy, have done this before and haven't seen the success.
I would say to them, I fully understand what you're saying. I mean, we started down this path 1993, so that's been 31 years ago. Yeah. It's not quick. If somebody says I can come in and make you a lean organization within 90 days, it'll never happen. It is a long-term process, but you have to have somebody, and I do believe to do it company-wide, it has to start at the very top, period. And they have to be committed to continual education, learning, and reinforcing it, because there's, you have to start it through the whole company. It can't be just manufacturing. It has to be the office, sales, technical people, computer operators, because we find it's not just an operations benefit, it's a sales benefit. So we have a salesperson, she deals with a large retail account, and that retail account we print signs of various signs, we put them into a box and we ship it to 1,000 to 1,500 stores. And depending on the configuration of signs, this retailer had 6 or 7 different box sizes. So our salesperson, thinking about how do I reduce variation, how do I reduce options, came up with an idea for them that there were 3 sizes that fit 95% of what they did. And why not just pick these 3 sizes, make them standard, we could inventory them, and then if we get an order at 3:00 today that has to ship tomorrow for a problematic issue or a rush package, we can do it. And the retailer was blown away by it, because they'd never had a vendor try to make things simpler and easier. And they adopted that across every vendor. So when we can get salespeople to be thinking, how can I make this process easier, better, faster, and safer? It will lower the price, but it's not the reason. If I can drive my customer to an easier process, they are going to be happy, because they don't want problems either, just like we don't want problems. We had a magazine we printed on really, really thin paper, and to get the lineups between page 5 and 6 to be perfect, you have to fold it perfect. But on the paper they were using, it was ultra thin paper, so you could never get it to perfectly line up. So we talked to the designer, who was unhappy every issue. It's a 32nd of an inch off. Because you can see it. So we talked to the designer about moving the lines out 1 inch on each side. And he goes, oh, that would still look good. And now you never saw it again. So we just made a small change that made our life easier and made him happier. And it didn't cost us any money. It didn't cost us any pain. So I do think that the whole continuous improvement, lean, theory of constraints, all of them help the customer live a better life, which ultimately helps us. So,
yeah. I mean, it's, again, it's all about delivering value and delivering value from their perspective. And you become more than a vendor or a supplier when you're approaching, your customers, your clients with ideas like this. Back to your example, right? This company has never had a vendor come back to them with an idea like that. And now all of a sudden, not only are you capturing some of that internally, you're capturing it, some of it externally, right? But at the end of the day, what you're really doing is putting yourself in a different category than just a commoditized, vendor supplier where that relationship can be replaced at any given time. You're putting yourself in a different category. And that's the hidden value of what these, tools and techniques and methodologies really can bring into an organization. I'm curious, how do you guys kind of support this throughout the company in terms of, that was a great example with your sales rep there. How do you guys continue to talk about this like across the organization, right? It's one thing to have leadership meetings and bring in maybe, some speakers or do some events like that. How do you get the message out to everybody though?
Our primary method for that is through our daily stand-up huddles. So once a week, we have, and it's probably a common term, a improvement newsletter. So if somebody has an idea to make a process better, they put it on this chart. Those charts monthly are gathered and then brought to the key managers, and they analyze it, they talk about it, then they give feedback to the person who had the idea. So once a week, everybody is in a conversation company-wide about lean and lean improvements. And when there's a mistake or when there's a defect, we have a question that we try to ask every single time. What in the process allowed this to happen? Because it pulls it away from it could be because the person's not good at what they do, but chances are it's not that. So anytime there's a defect, whether the customer sees it or not, our question is, what in the process allowed this to happen? And then the question is, how can we make it easier, better, faster, and safer? And then we try to get people involved in ideas, because we know if we have a major problem and we change the process, the chance of it happening again goes down. If I just say, come on, we've got to try harder, nothing will change for long. Or you can, we're not a yelling culture, but if you're a yelling culture, you can start yelling at people, and then all they'll do is back up and not do anything unless it's been checked by somebody else. So that way it's not their fault. So the goal is to say, what in the process needs to change? If there's conflicting information on the job ticket and somebody makes a mistake, we're looking for how did conflicting information happen, not why did they make the mistake. We know why they made the mistake. They had bad inputs. So I think it's about a culture of fix the process. Now, it is true that if we have somebody who over multiple instances doesn't want to improve, then we have to move on. But that is the rare exception. The more common thing is somebody comes in and wants to do their job well every day. And if they're making a mistake, how can we poke-yoke the system? And if I have to bring something to work from home and I think about it at 6 o'clock the night before, I put it in my car. I never forget it if it's in my car. And it's the same here. If I'm not allowed to move past step A until I do something, I don't forget it. So that's kind of that's our goal. It's not a perfect place. It's not a perfect system, but it is a system. You know, I was at I'll back up a little. About 3 years ago, the company was purchased by a private equity firm. And it's a company that bought us that's about 20 times larger than we are. Big process, big, high-end people. And I was invited to a meeting with the private equity firm about a month ago. And the CEO that I don't report directly to him, but he's the CEO of our holding company. He introduced me to our chairman of the board. And he said, he looked at me and he goes, "Now, don't take this the wrong way, Roy." And then he turns to the other guy and he goes, "Yeah, when we bought that company, we thought it was this little company in the Midwest. We were going to have to go in and fix it up and put processes in place and procedures." And he goes, "We didn't do a thing to it." And to me, that was a compliment towards our founder and Lean. Because Lean is all about building those systems to be repeatable. And it was, he thought it was a little bit of an insult. I took it as 100% compliment because true, we don't have any Ivy League MBAs, but we've spent 30 years trying to build a better system. And whether it's Toyota production system, Lean, theory of constraints, to me, it's all the same. It's what in the system can be made better so that the customer gets a consistent quality product and then they trust you more. And then everybody wins.
Yeah. Man, that's it's that is a huge compliment because typically that is kind of the model in that space and to package things up and usually to repurpose them. But at the end of the day, it is a tremendous compliment for all of the work that you guys have done. And back to your point earlier, the stuff, largely speaking, is simple. But it is not easy.
Hard. Yeah.
It is a lot of simplistic tools. It's a lot of, bringing people along the journey. It's a lot of communication. But none of it is easy because it involves people. It involves, planning and process and a lot of times technology. So hats off for the work that you guys have done. Is there anything that maybe we didn't cover that you'd love to share with folks out there? Maybe some final thoughts around, starting a lean journey?
I think what popped in my head was make it personal. So I have my toolbox at home, and in the top left drawer is my tape measure. And I can get my tape measure out of my toolbox in the dark, because it's always in the same spot because of 5S. And our son and daughter-in-law lived with us recently for about a month because they sold a house, moved to the city we live in, and bought a house, and there was a gap. And our daughter-in-law said to me one day, she goes, "Can I borrow your tape measure?" I said, "Yes." I said, "The toolbox is right out the door to the left, and the top left drawer is where the tape measure is." And I thought to myself, life is just so much easier when the systems are under control. And when I think about that at home, I think about it at work, I think about it with our kids. Like our kids learned the 7 waste and 5S and all of that as they were growing up. And I joke with people, but it's helped them. When they think about defects, overproduction, overprocessing, waiting, transportation, inventory, motion, they know what that is. They know what 5S is, and it's made their lives better. And if it can do that for my family, easily it could do that at work. So I think making it personal probably reinforces it better than anything.
Yeah. That's great, man. I love it. Roy, for anybody that wants to reach out and connect with you, where's the best place for people to find you at?
I'd say LinkedIn, just Roy Waterhouse with Hopkins Printing. So I'm fairly active on LinkedIn. I like that. It's a good place to interact with people. It's how you and I met. So
Yeah.
I wouldn't be able to do this with you without LinkedIn. So I appreciate it very much.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much for coming on the Everyday Business Problems podcast.
All righty. Thank you, Dave. Have a great day.
Thanks. Thank you so much for listening today. If we brought you any value, please rate, subscribe, and share our podcast. Also, be sure to connect with us on social media by searching @The Crysler Club. Until next week, I'm your host, Dave Crysler.